Roberta Smith. I'm an art critic at the New York Times, and I'm interested in all kinds of art, including outsider.
My name's Jerry Saltz. I'm the senior art critic for New York Magazine. I think of myself as an outsider critic, even though people would say that's absurd. You're an insider.
Well, that's an interesting place to start. Is there such a thing as an outsider?
Well, to the extent that the art world is especially full of autodidacts, yes. I mean, I feel like most people in the art world are to some extent self-taught because they figure out how they're going to be around art, or they figure out the art that they want to make. I mean, there are tons of really famous artists who have barely, like Jasper Johns doesn't have that much art education. You know, the idea of self-taught is much more diffuse. It's not limited to people that that function outside of the art world. So, yeah, I think that we all, to a certain extent, we are.
How many degrees do you have?
I just have an undergraduate degree,
One would never know. So,
and I have no degrees whatsoever. I was a long-distance truck driver. I'm a failed artist. I wanted to be an art critic. I wanted to be anything if I could get in the art world. It didn't matter to me what it was.
But do you know what it was that was trying to get you to go there? I mean,
No. And I had no idea what it was. I did see that the people in the art world were they were sleeping with each other easier than other worlds. So that seemed interesting.
So part of what you try and do is actually just give people the opportunity to know about something, maybe.
Right, to point at something. And in the process also to just remind people constantly how complicated visual culture is. And that always, at all times, there are many, many people making all kinds of things that are interesting and important to look at. And it's not just art, there's design, there's engineering, there are all these things that were getting made that add up. And some of them get saved and brought forward, and we see them in museums, or we see them, in the old buildings of Venice. You just walk around and you can see what people did at a certain point. They built things this way. And art has a similar, art is just one part of this immense terrain of visual culture. And art is much larger, even as its own terrain, than most people kind of realize, And that also is why I'm interested in, outsider art is it's a really important area that broadens our understanding.
Well, it's interesting why the narrow choice is being made, and maybe not these other histories not sort of getting limelight.
I think a couple of generations of critics and curators and even artists have been more or less destroyed. I have no doubt about their great intentions, brilliance, learnedness, honesty, openness, but the idea that the art world has become so academicized that everyone speaks more or less the same language, agrees on more or less the same artist as being the canonical artist, that the story be told more or less the same way, that what's happened is coming out of even art schools, you have artists, critics, and curators and collectors self-branding themselves to be sort of junior postmodernists. It's pretty easy to see, if you know the entire game, what a next move might be, or where each move fits in. It's pretty damn hard if you're suddenly going off the radar and popping up in unexpected places, unexpected mediums, unexpected people, unexpected generations. I would also say if art doesn't let more of the world in, the world will let less art in. It's that simple.
The main thing that holds people together is time. All of these artists are working at certain times. Like, what does Rousseau have to do with Pollock? With Picasso. They're making art at the same time out of some of the same things. They shouldn't be that separate. They aren't that separate. But we can't let Martin Ramirez in, who in some ways I've written before is sort of could be seen as our Rousseau, because you can You can relate him to different kinds of figuration. You can relate him to abstraction with his, his regimented stripes and things. Like, there's not.
And the curators would say, why? Why can't? If you said to them, well, they like Ramirez. We know they like them. Why can't
because
Ramirez
it disrupts,
be in?
it messes up this narrative, that particularly see it at the Museum of Modern Art, where art just kind of narrows down to conceptualism, and the last few galleries of their permanent collection is nothing but conceptual art. And you're looking at art between, say, 1970 and 1985, there's all kinds of stuff going on there. You have the outbreak of neo-expressionism. Do you get any idea of that? No. Well, you're certainly not going to get the fact that Ramirez, Ramirez is parallel with pop art. He dies in 1966. He's using collage. He's cutting things out of magazines.
Mm-hmm.
Darger, the connections have been drawn between Darger and Warhol. Darger is taking, I don't know what, images out of coloring books, I can't remember, and going to a photo department and store and having them enlarged.
I think quite often with these artists, that's the case, and that's why you get into that difficult biography, non-biography situation.
Well, the idea that everything in outsider art is grounded and can't be romanticized and mythologized, and is grounded in just the exact same way that what we call insider artists, that they're, whether you talk about Pollock seeing seeing sand painting or hieroglyphs or whatever, that all of it, it's all as specific. That immediately removes a big separation, or a big rationale for a separation. And there just has to be more and more of this. And, for example, like Jerry was saying last night, somebody's saying, well, how can they be artists? These people are in prison, they're homeless, or they're insane. But one thing that always struck me about Wolfli and Ramirez is, when I first saw Ramirez's work, I was just thinking, well, what if there's this inborn urge to be an artist, inborn in these guys who had no chance? The thing that I think we look for in art is a kind of urgency, like the artist could not help but do it. And what we have in contemporary art right now is a lot of calculation, where the artist could. There's no sense of that urgency or necessity.
And by the way, Caravaggio was homeless, incarcerated, and insane. We call murderers insane, so boom. And 90% of the artists I've ever met are kind of a little insane. And if you hear Bryce Marden explain his monochromes, or a great genius blowhard like Barnett Newman explain his stripes, it's no more insane sounding than any so-called outsider. None.
Look, we are here at the Biennale. So Massimiliano has done this thing. So I'd be interested to know what you feel about the reasons for it. Like why do it? Also, the last time you guys made, between the two of you made a very loud, bold series of statements, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, in the press, repeatedly, rallied against the segregation, basically.
Totally.
And talking about that, then how do you think this fits into what you were calling for?
So what was political in this show, for the people who will now complain the show isn't political enough, is the politic is his definition of art and what an artist is charged.
And elastic.
And what? And more elastic. That is the political act in this show. Sorry if it isn't the right politic. People say that he's primitivizing, say, Africa and South America, sort of turning everybody into witch doctors and voodoo men. Again, no more than Bryce Marden is to me. Honest to God, if this guy drawing little snakes and slivers, to me it's the same. One thing that is a little problematic is he looks at the soma. Is it soma? The gigantic work. The work that involves the archive, the encyclopedia, brings with it a mail coded drive. The mail coded drive seems to be to organize gigantic numbers of work in order to systematize and understand the world, because men are idiots and we have fear of chaos. And so it's a pre-selected show where Massimiliano isn't a misogynist, but that may be why only 14% of this show is women, because the lens he picked is a highly controlling lens.
So definitely I agree with you. What's phenomenal about the whole Biennale is that something else isn't something else. I mean, that's what when I wrote in the catalogue, I wrote a poem because I didn't know what the hell to write. And I wrote a poem about being different. And that actually being different is probably what we look for in the art.
Because it's the same thing.
You look for what you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
You're always looking for that, to some degree, or to a huge, in a huge way or a small way. We look for a kind of freshness. That's what draws your eye.
I sort of look for confirmation of who I am. I look for something where my engagement with the object is somehow giving me a sense of existence in that moment.
Emerson called that something coming to you with an alienated majesty. That you knew it before you knew it. The way all Shakespeare.
Right.
That he knows anything you can possibly ever know, and when you hear it, you get that. That otherness suddenly becomes part of you.
Well,
that's beautiful.
I also think the way you say it's about you is what you have as an experience of your senses working. You have an experience of that you are perceiving something and you're absorbing something in it, and you're making meaning using that experience. So it's like, yes, my parts work.
Yeah.
In front of this makes me experience my thinking, my feeling, all this stuff.
I would like to say that I would like to make a prediction in the month of June 2013 that the borders are not down at all around the word outsider. On the contrary, I think all three of us would agree the art world is about to mount a counteraction and to try to toughen up this border. Not because they're assholes, because they're not. They love art as much as everybody. But people will now try to define the term again. And those definitions will start to put up walls, and they will include what we already know. They will include, artists that we are following know about history of art. That will be one. The other will be, you're just going after the incarcerated, the homeless, and the insane. And again, I would
the
say...
artists with great narratives.
Right. I would just say, think in the model of YouTube or a digital camera or anybody using a computer, and all of those words should fall for you. It's all one ball of wax.